I want to be clear that whenever I see people doing the great resignation, when they're resigning, it's not usually from a place of peace, and it's not usually from a place of, well, I just think I'm going to quit my job today. Like, I'm going to go out there and find my purpose, and I'm going to just have this great experience. Most of the time, when people get to the point that they're going to resign without already having another position lined up, there's a lot of emotional discomfort that comes with that. They're either, yeah, so I actually even have a chapter in the book called "The Book That Changed My Life," and the book that I really resonated with strongly was The Lazy Genius Way by Kendra Adachi. It's about a prioritization of the things that are the most important to you and quieting all of the external voices that say, this is what you should want, this is what is important to everyone else. And it's really about identifying what are those things that are important to you in your ecosystem, to the people who you're interacting with. And I think that's the spirit of this book. It's applying some of those similar concepts to the job market. It's about saying, what are your work values? What are the things that you bring to the table that nobody else can bring to the table? How do you want to use those skills? But taking it less from a self-only focused perspective, and then taking it out into the world and saying, how can I use these to solve problems for other people? How can I use this to serve other people? How do I get on board with the missions that other people have? And by doing so, really be able to launch my career in a different place with a lot more passion. And I do see some people who are leaving, especially healthcare, because there was a breach of trust between the administrative staff and the frontline staff. And I'm seeing that in pharmacies. I'm seeing that in, even to a certain extent, like retail environments too, where there was a loss of trust. I think in terms of why people are leaving managers, like where the trust broke down with that, a lot of it is about responses to external events. When I talk about, well, what are you looking for? What's really important to you? What are those values? A lot of the things that come up a lot is trust, flexibility, and it's about that ability to work within passion. There is a way of working that balances your energy optimally. When you are in a state that is described in psychology as flow, so where you are basically losing track of time or you're doing deep work, there's a lot of different words for it. But when you're in that state more frequently, you have more energy at the end of the day. The two enemies of that are anxiety and boredom. And so people don't want to be bored and they don't want to be anxious at work. They want to have that kind of maximum productivity that can only come when they spend more of that time in that flow state. That one-on-one personal relationship with the person that's hiring you matters perhaps even more the than the mission of the company. And I'm not going to say that the mission of the company doesn't ever matter, because it does. So we talk a lot about skills, we talk a lot about competencies, and we say, okay, well, what other jobs other than the one that you were doing uses these and doesn't use these other ones that perhaps you don't want to be hired for? The hiring process loses a lot of people. And I think that there are ways of setting up your hiring process in a way that both gets you the most effective employees without making people think they're jumping through too many hoops. They don't like the generic response, I'm sorry, we went with a more qualified applicant, especially because in some cases, and in fact, in a lot of cases, that isn't actually true. They just went with a different candidate. It wasn't a more qualified candidate, because the person who applied actually was rather qualified for the role, but they just went with a different candidate, or the first qualified candidate that they saw, or the first 10 qualified candidates they saw, not necessarily that they went with a more qualified applicant. That phrase in particular really is like salt in a wound for a lot of people. I think that one of the other things that people generally don't like and don't trust is when people offload their natural intuition into a personality inventory during the application process. So employees are totally fine with taking a personality assessment or a work assessment to help the team function more effectively, but people who are being considered for roles do not want to do personality assessments because they feel like it's a not very transparent part of the process. I would suggest that if you're going through a hiring process, you pay more attention to crafting better quality questions, and trusting or building your intuition a little bit more than just doing a personality assessment. And it's exhausting for people, and it really hurts their spirit to go through all of that and then to never hear back. Like they'll just stop hearing back from somebody one day and they have no idea what happened. And I think sometimes one thing we forget is like how important closing that loop can be for people's spirit.